The snapping of a dry wood fire is the only thing you hear in the quiet. It's a steady popping sound, the kind that shows you just how silent the rest of the world has become. A heavy wood door, dark with years of oil and rough weather, creaks open on rusty iron hinges. The sound bounces off the stone walls like a low groan from the house itself. As it opens, it lets in a rush of air so cold it feels like a heavy weight, a sudden push against your chest that takes the breath right out of your lungs. You're standing 7,000 feet up in a village that feels like it's hanging on the edge of the world. This is Ushguli, and as you look out, the view doesn't look real. It looks like a painting from a time before people even thought of the concept of a straight line. The houses are made of sharp shale and river stones, piled high and topped with heavy slate roofs. An old woman stands in the doorway. Her name is Lamara, though she hasn't said it yet. She doesn't have to. Her presence tells you everything. Her skin is a living map, marked with deep, silver lines that tell the story of 80 winters spent in this thin air. Her eyes are the color of the Caspian Sea during a storm, a moving, smart gray. Her hands, rough and strong, are stained a deep, earthy dark from hours of peeling fresh green walnuts, the juices soaking into her skin like a permanent glove. She reaches out. There is no waiting in her movement. She gives you a piece of bread. It's called shotis puri. It's shaped like a long, thin canoe, pulled fresh from the side of a deep clay oven. It's so hot that the steam doesn't just rise, it vanishes into the thin mountain air the very second it hits your face, leaving behind the great smell of toasted yeast, wood smoke, and salt. You take a bite, and the crust breaks with a good crunch, showing a center so soft and light it feels like a cloud. Behind her, the sharp, white-capped peaks of the greater Caucasus Mountains aren't just part of the view, they hide half the sky. They stand like a wall of rock and ice, a sharp fence of limestone and stone that keeps you away from the rest of the world. Shkara, the highest spot in Georgia, hangs over the village like a silent god, its ice glowing with a pale, ghostly blue light in the afternoon sun. There are no tour buses here, no gift shops selling plastic things, no neon signs flashing "open." Just the sharp, clean smell of mountain pine, the far, steady ring of sheep bells sounding from the high fields, and a sense of time that doesn't move the way it does back home. Back home, time is a hunter, always chasing you. Here, time is the mountain. It just is. In the high village of Ushguli, people still live in old stone towers. These aren't ruins or museum items, they are homes. Built to keep families safe from the tough twin threats of blood feuds and huge crushing snowslides, these towers, known as koshki, touch the sky. They are signs of a tough spirit that has refused to die for over 1,000 years. We're about to go on a trip that covers the width of this wild area, from the bright, oil-slicked streets of Baku, known as the Land of Fire, to secret mountain churches in Armenia, where the very first wine in human history was made in clay jars deep in the ground. Stay with me, because I'm going to take you to a hidden valley where the locals speak a language found nowhere else on Earth. A voice that sounds like the wind blowing through a canyon. You'll see why they might just bring you in for a 10-hour dinner, even if they've never seen your face before. If you miss the rest of this, you'll never know the one rule of Caucasian kindness that, if you break it, is seen as a huge, unforgivable insult to your host. It's a rule that is more than just being nice. It's about the deep bond between a traveler and a protector. Welcome back to AI Clever Spaces. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button right now. Really, do it. Because what you're about to see, the stories you're about to hear, and the faces you're about to meet are going to totally change the way you look at the map of the world. We aren't just looking at maps today. We're looking at the heart of a place that the world almost forgot. Part 1. The Wall Between Worlds. Hidden away between the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea, the Caucasus is a huge mountain wall that really separates Europe from Asia. It's not just a line on the map, it's a crash of the Earth. Millions of years ago, the Arabian Plate hit the Eurasian Plate, pushing the ground upward into these scary, beautiful peaks. It's a place split between three main countries: Georgia, Armenia, and Azerbaijan, and many of different local groups, each with their own language, their own stories, and their own way of getting through the winter. For years, this was the most dangerous and most beautiful part of the Silk Road. Imagine the groups of the 1200s, hundreds of camels loaded with silk, spices, and blue stones, moving through these narrow paths. They had to deal with thieves, sudden snow, and scary heights. It was the place where empires met, fought, and in the end, gave up. The Romans tried to hold it. The Mongols moved through it like a knife. The Persians and the Ottomans fought for control of its valleys for hundreds of years. But the mountains always won. The mountains are the main gatekeepers. Today, it stays one of the few spots left on Earth where old kindness hasn't been turned into a fake tourist trap. In the West, we've turned everything into a product. We have real moments that are shown on apps and paid for early. But in the Caucasus, the view looks exactly like it did 1,000 years ago, and the people still live by rules of honor that feel like they belong in an old history book. There is a weight to the air here, a feel that history isn't something that happened in the past. It's something that is still going on, every time a fire is lit or a toast is made. Part 2. Georgia, the table is the map. Let's start in Georgia. If you ask a Georgian about their country, they won't pull out a phone or point to a map. They'll start with a table. In the Georgian mind, the table is the center of the world. There's this idea called the supra. It's often called a feast, but calling it a feast is like calling the ocean a pond. It's a long time of eating, drinking, telling stories, and sharing feelings. I remember sitting at a supra in a small town called Talavi, in the middle of the wine area. The table was so full of plates that you couldn't see the wood of the table. There was hachapuri, a bread filled with so much melted, salty cheese that it sat like a lake. There were hinkali, huge soup dumplings twisted into nice knobs of dough. The trick, I was told by a man named Georgi, whose mustache was as thick as a brush, is to bite a small hole in the side, suck out the hot, spicy meat soup, and then eat the rest. If you drop the soup on your plate, Georgi said with a wink, it means you are not yet a man. At the head of every table is a tamada, or a toastmaster. This isn't just someone who says cheers and sits down. The tamada is a thinker, a joker, a priest, and a leader. They lead the table through a set of planned toasts that can last for hours. They don't just toast to health, they toast to the complex nature of life. The tamada at our table was an old man named Vakhtang. He stood up, his glass full of amber wine, and his voice dropped to a low, deep sound. "We toast to the ancestors," he said, his eyes looking around the room. "Not because they are gone, but because they are the roots that let us stand tall in the wind. Without the root, the fruit has no sweetness." He spoke for 5 minutes, telling a story about his grandfather's courage during a time of hunger, and by the end of it, half the table was in tears. This is the key. In Georgia, they have a saying, "A guest is a gift from God." They really, truly mean it. This isn't a selling slogan for a hotel chain. You could be walking down a random street in a village, and if a family sees you, there's a high chance they'll pull you into their yard. They don't ask if you're hungry, they guess you are. They'll sit you down and start bringing out plates of walnut pate and grilled pork until you really can't move. To say no is to hurt them. To stay is to become part of the family. In the capital city, Tbilisi, this energy is everywhere. It's a city that's been broken and rebuilt 29 times. Think about that. Every time an enemy burned it to the ground, the Georgians just waited for them to leave and then started piling stones again. You can see this strength in the buildings. It's a wild, beautiful mess. There are the famous sulfur baths in the Abanotubani area. They look like old brick domes sticking out of the ground like giant molehills. I walked down into one of them, the air thick and wet. The smell of sulfur stays heavy, a thick, eggy scent that locals say is the secret to long life and clear skin. Inside, the walls are covered in fine blue mosaics, and the water is a very hot, mineral-rich heat that seems to melt the stress right off your bones. Not far from the baths, you'll find a clock tower that looks like it was made by a drunk fairy tale builder. It's leaning at a crazy, scary angle, held up by a single, rusty steel beam. Every hour, a small window opens and a metal angel comes out to hit the bell. It's messy, it's old, it's a bit broken, and it's very beautiful. It shows Tbilisi perfectly, a city that refuses to be perfect, but wants to stay alive. Part 3. The Secret in the Earth. But to really understand Georgia, you have to leave the city and go into the ground. I want you to meet Baya. She's a young woman in her 20s with a bright smile and dirt under her fingernails.
A few years ago, she could have taken an office job in the city, but she decided to move back to her family's old land in the Imereti area to keep an 8,000-year-old tradition alive. Baya is a winemaker, but she doesn't use the tools of modern science. She makes wine in quievres. These are huge, lemon-shaped clay jars, some big enough to hold 2 grown men, that are buried deep in the cool ground. This is the way it has been done since old times. I stood with her in her cellar, which they call a Marani. The floor was just dirt and stone, with round wooden lids level with the ground. "Listen," she whispered. She knelt down and cracked open the seal of a buried quievre. The sound was a low, hollow sss, like the earth itself was letting out a long-held breath. The smell that hit me was strong. Dried fruit, honey, walnut shells, and damp earth. Georgians don't use metal tanks or oak barrels in the usual way. They let the grapes, skins, seeds, stems, and all, sit together underground. When the wine comes out, it isn't the clear, pale yellow stuff you see in a grocery store. It's amber-colored, bold, and strong. It tastes like history. It tastes like the soil it was grown in. "This wine is our blood," Baya said, dipping a long wooden ladle into the jar. "When the enemies came, they would chop down our vines first, because they knew that if they killed the vines, they killed the spirit of the Georgian people. But we always saved the seeds. We always planted again." Georgia is officially the birthplace of wine. Proof in the area goes back 8,000 years. Think about that for a second. While the rest of the world was barely figuring out how to make basic tools, people in these valleys were already master winemakers. They were making toasts, singing songs, and drinking wine before the pyramids were even planned. Part 4. Into the Forbidden Highland. But the mountains hide a darker side. To see it, you have to drive north, leaving the rolling hills of the wine country behind and heading into the high Caucasus. We're going to Svaneti. This is the Forbidden Highland. For years, Svaneti was a place of myths. The road to get there was so dangerous, so prone to slides and thieves, that the area was basically cut off from the world for half the year. Even today,
The drive is a scary, heart-in-your-throat experience. The road is a narrow strip of asphalt, and sometimes just gravel, clinging to the side of a cliff. On one side, you have tall walls of rock. On the other, a straight drop of 2,000 feet down to the gray waters of the Nguri River. If you're the kind of person who'd choose a rough mountain trail over a busy beach resort, you really need to hit that subscribe button. We're exploring the world's wildest corners all year long, and you don't want to miss the next one. When you finally reach the final pass and look down into the valley of Ushguli, the air changes. It's thinner, sharper. It tastes like ice and stone. This is one of the highest lived-in spots in Europe, and it looks like it has been frozen in the year 1100. The skyline is dominated by those stone towers I mentioned. Every family had one. They weren't just for show, they were forts. Svaneti was a land of free people who never had a king. But freedom came with a price: blood feuds. If a member of one family hurt or killed a member of another, a cycle of revenge would start that could last for years. When the enemy family came for revenge, the whole family, including the animals, would go into the tower. They'd pull up the wooden ladder to the second floor, lock the heavy door, and live there for weeks, shooting arrows or dropping stones from the narrow holes in the walls. Svaneti was never fully taken. Not by the Mongols, not by the Persians, not by the Russian Empire. The land is just too steep, the people too stubborn. The Svans have their own language, which is totally different from Georgian. It's a language that isn't written down, a voice of the high peaks, passed down through haunting songs and stories told around the fire. I met a man there named Erikli. He was chopping wood outside his tower, his movements slow and careful. His face was like a piece of rock, hard and worn. I asked him if it was hard to live here, where the winter lasts 8 months. He stopped, leaned on his axe, and looked up at the peaks. "The mountain gives us everything," he said in a low voice. "It gives us water, it gives us safety, it gives us a reason to be strong. Why would I want to live in a place where life is easy? If life is easy, you forget who you are." Up here, the food is made for survival. You've got to try kubdari. It's a heavy, thick meat pie, but it's the spices that make it famous. They use a mountain herb that only grows in these high places. It has a flavor that's hard to describe, somewhere between seeds, wild thyme, and something like the smell of a storm. The pie is salty, spicy, and fatty. The kind of fuel you need when your daily life involves walking up steep slopes to look after your cows. There's a toughness in the people here, but it's wrapped in that same great kindness. They'll share their last piece of bread with you, but they'll also look you in the eye with a gaze that is very honest. They've survived things the modern world has long forgotten: being alone, hunger, and the heavy weight of the snow. Part 5. Armenia, the Kingdom of Stones. Now let's cross the border into Armenia. If Georgia is the land of the vine, Armenia is the Kingdom of Stones. As you cross the border, the view changes almost instantly. The green forests of Georgia give way to a world that is more rocky, more rough, and somehow even more ancient. Hanging over everything, literally everything, is Mount Ararat. It's a huge, snow-covered volcano that sits just across the border in Turkey. For Armenians, Ararat isn't just a mountain. It is the heartbeat of their soul. It is their guide. They believe it's the place where Noah's Ark landed after the Great Flood. Even though they can't reach the mountain today because the border is closed due to years of political stress, they look at it every single day from the capital, Yerevan. It's a steady, beautiful, and painful reminder of their history. Yerevan is known as the Pink City. It's a nickname that sounds nice, but it has a very real reason. Almost all the buildings in the city center are built from a local volcanic stone called tuff. It comes in different shades, but the most common is a soft, dusty, pinkish purple.
At sunset, when the light hits the buildings at just the right angle, the whole city seems to glow with a warm light. It's one of the oldest lived-in cities in the world, started in 782 BC, which makes it about 30 years older than Rome. But the real magic of Armenia isn't found in the city streets. It's out in the wild, where the stone meets the sky. Take Khor Virap, for example. It's a church sitting on a small hill in the middle of a huge flat plain. You stand there, looking at the old stone walls of the church, and behind it, the huge white peaks of Ararat fill the entire horizon. It's a sight that makes your head spin. It's too big for the human eye to take in. I met a monk there, Father Sahak, whose black robes were dusty from the wind. He pointed toward the mountain. "We are a people of the mountain," he said. "Even when we are in the valley, our eyes are up there. The stone is our book. We carve our prayers into it because stone doesn't forget. Paper burns, wood rots, but stone remains." He was talking about hachkars, Armenian crossstones. These are fine, hand-carved slabs of rock featuring a central cross surrounded by patterns of grapes, leaves, and shapes. There are thousands of them scattered across the country, each one unique, each one a silent prayer left by someone years ago. Part 6. The 6,000-year-old mystery. But there's a secret buried in the ground in Armenia that rivals Georgia's wine history. We're heading to the Areni 1 cave. It's a sharp opening in a cliff in the Vyots Dzor area. Inside this cave, experts found something that changed our understanding of human history. They found the oldest winery ever found on Earth. We're talking about 4100 BC. That's over 6,000 years ago. They found large jars, wine presses, and even old grape seeds. But the most human discovery was a single leather shoe, perfectly kept by the cave's cool, dry air. It's the oldest leather shoe in the world, older than Stonehenge, older than the Great Pyramid of Giza. Walking through that cave, you feel a strange shiver. The people living in the village of Areni today are doing the exact same things their ancestors were doing 6,000 years ago. They're still growing the same local grape types, they're still using the same mountain water, and they're still baking their bread in underground ovens called toniers. Armenia was the very first nation in the world to make Christianity its official religion, back in 301 AD. Because of that, the country is full of these great stone churches that look like they grew straight out of the cliffs. Take Geghard. The name means spear, and it's said to have once held the spear that hurt the side of Christ. But the building itself is the real miracle. Half of the church is actually carved directly into the solid rock of the mountain. When you walk inside, the temperature drops 15 degrees. The air is cool and smells of candles and damp stone. The sound inside is haunting. Because the rooms were carved out of solid rock, the sound bounces in a way that feels magic. I stood in the main room as a woman began to sing a traditional Armenian song. Her voice didn't just fill the room, it seemed to shake the floor and go into my bones. A single person singing sounded like a whole choir. There are no golden statues here, no flashy decorations. It's just dark stone, deeply carved crosses, and a sense of heavy, silent history that makes you want to whisper. Part 7. The bread of survival. The land in Armenia is tough. Dry summers, hard winters, and rocky soil. But that toughness has created some of the most tasty food on the planet. Armenian food is all about survival, patience, and turning simple things into something great. Take lavash bread.
It's a paper-thin flatbread that is vital to Armenian life. I watched a group of women in a village near Lake Savan making it. It's a steady process. One woman rolls the dough into a thin sheet, another stretches it over a large cushion, and then she leans deep into the tonier, the underground oven, and slaps the dough against the hot clay walls. It sticks, bubbles up in seconds, and is pulled out with a metal hook. They make hundreds of sheets at a time. The brilliance of lavash is that it's made for a life on the move. They dry the sheets out until they're thin like crackers, and then they stack them up. They can stay good for months. When you're ready to eat, you just spray a little water on a sheet, wrap it in a towel for a few minutes, and it becomes soft again. It's a bread made for people who had to be ready to move at any time. People who have spent years being pushed around by empires, but always kept their ovens hot. Then there's korovats, Armenian barbecue. This isn't just about grilling meat, it's a ritual. In Armenia, the men are the masters of the fire. They gather around the grill using huge metal tools. They don't use coal, they use dried vines. The wood of the vine gives the meat, usually seasoned pork or lamb, a sweet, smoky flavor that you can't get anywhere else. The smell of that smoke, mixed with the scent of fresh basil and onions, is the smell of an Armenian summer. Every dish tells a story of survival. Whether it's meat and rice wrapped in grape leaves, or the thick, tangy yogurt called matsun, the food is a way of keeping their culture alive. It's a way of saying, we are still here. We still eat the food of our land, and we still remember who we are. I'm honestly getting hungry just talking about this. If you've ever had the chance to try real Caucasian food, the kind that makes you want to cancel your flight home, drop a comment and tell me what your favorite dish was. If you haven't had it yet, hit that like button to help us get there and show you more of these hidden gems. Believe me, you haven't lived until you've sat in a Yerevan backyard, drinking coffee so thick it's like liquid velvet, and having an old grandmother read your fortune in the dark patterns of the coffee grounds left at the bottom of your cup. It's a world where the mystical and the everyday just walk hand in hand. Part 8. Azerbaijan, the land of fire. But now we have to head east. We're leaving the high, rocky Christian churches of Armenia and heading toward the shores of the Caspian Sea to Azerbaijan. This is where things change completely. If Georgia and Armenia feel like stepping back into an old dream, Azerbaijan feels like stepping into the future, but a future that is built on top of an ancient fire. Baku, the capital, is a city of big contrasts. It's often called the Paris of the East, and you can see why. On one side, you have the old city. It's a maze of narrow, winding stone alleys, hidden yards, and ancient inns. These were the places on the Silk Road where traders from China and India would park their camels, unload their spices, and sleep safely. You can still see the rings in the stone where the animals were tied up. But then you look up. Hanging over the ancient walls are the flame towers. These are three huge, curved skyscrapers that rule the skyline. They are covered in thousands of LED screens that, at night, flash with the image of moving orange and red flames. They are a tribute to Azerbaijan's identity as the land of fire. Azerbaijan is known as the land of fire for a very real reason. The ground here is so rich with oil and natural gas that in some places, the earth just catches fire on its own. There's a spot called Yanar Dag, or the Burning Mountain. I went there at dusk, and it was one of the strangest things I've ever seen. It's not a volcano, it's just a hillside where natural gas is leaking out through the rock. Because of a spark, perhaps thousands of years ago, the hillside caught fire, and it has been burning ever since. Marco Polo wrote about these fires when he passed through in the 13th century. The fire never goes out. It burns through heavy rain, it burns through winter snow, and it burns through the strong winds of the Caspian. It's a cool sight,
bright orange flames coming out of the dark dirt, fueled by an endless supply of energy from deep underground. Ancient religions were started on the worship of these eternal flames, seeing them as a sign of purity.
Part 9. The Black Gold Bath. But the connection to the Earth's energy gets even weirder. We're heading to a town called Naftalin. In most parts of the world, oil is something you put in your car. In Naftalin, it's something you bathe in. I'm not kidding. People come from all over the world to sit in a tub full of thick, black, warm crude oil. This isn't the kind of oil you get at a gas station. It's a specific type of healing crude. I visited one of the clinics there. The smell is the first thing that hits you. It's like being in a car shop, but cleaner. I saw a man named Victor who was sitting in the tub, only his head sticking out of the black liquid. He looked like he had been dipped in chocolate, but the chocolate was raw oil. "It feels heavy," he told me, smiling as he lifted an arm dripping with black slime. "It's warm, and you can feel the heat soaking into your joints. After 10 minutes, you feel like a new person." Locals believe it cures everything from skin problems to joint pain. There's even a museum in town filled with walking sticks left behind by people who say the oil healed them. It's one of those things you have to see to believe. People literally dripping with oil, all in the name of health. Part 10. The Isolated Peak of Shinalik. But Azerbaijan isn't just about oil wealth and modern towers. If you drive a few hours north of Baku, the road begins to twist and climb. The city disappears, replaced by green hills and then the bare peaks of the greater Caucasus. We're heading to Shinalik. This is one of the most isolated and highest villages in the whole area. For most of history, Shinalik was completely cut off. To get there, you had to travel for days on horseback. Today, there's a road, but it's often blocked by snow or rocks. The people who live here speak a language called Ketch. It's a language spoken only in this village and nowhere else on the planet. It's a complex tongue that has survived because the mountains acted as a shield. The village itself is built in a smart way. Because the mountain is so steep, the houses are built on top of each other. The flat roof of the house below you actually serves as the front yard for your house. You'll see children playing or women hanging laundry on what is basically their neighbor's ceiling. Life here moves with the sheep. In the summer, the shepherds move the flocks to the high fields. In the winter, they bring them down. They look at tourists from the city like they're visitors from another planet. I sat with an old man named Elman, who was wearing a thick sheepskin hat. We drank tea out of small glasses. The tea was dark and strong, flavored with wild mountain herbs. In the city, they have everything, Elman said, looking out over the clouds. They have fast cars and bright lights. But do they have peace? Here, the only thing that talks to me is the wind. And the wind never lies. Part 11. The Tension of the New Caucasus. The Caucasus is at an interesting and sometimes painful modern crossroads. You see it everywhere you go. In Tbilisi, there's a place called Fabrika. It used to be a huge gray factory where women made uniforms for the army. Today, it's been turned into a big urban space. The walls are covered in art. There are bars, cafes, and a hostel. It's full of young Georgians with laptops, working on tech startups or design. They are part of a huge wave of people working online. People are realizing that you can live in one of the most beautiful places on Earth for a low cost. There's a lot of modern energy in the air, but right outside, The old Caucasus is still very much alive. You'll see an old man in a faded coat driving an old car, the trunk full of tomatoes from his garden. He's selling them to people passing by, his face showing years of hard work. That's the tension. There's still a shadow of the Soviet era, the big concrete buildings and the old factories. The older generation often has mixed feelings. They remember the hard times of the 90s, but they also remember a time of peace. But the young people? They are looking in a different direction. They want the internet and modern life. They want to turn their old traditions into something new. In Armenia, there's a big tech boom. In Azerbaijan, the government is spending billions on luxury travel and international events. Yet, despite all the glass buildings and the hip cafes, the heart of the area remains tied to the land. Part 12. A moment of eternal silence. I remember one specific morning that captured the whole spirit of the Caucasus for me. I was at the Gergeti Trinity Church near the town of Kazbegi in northern Georgia. To get there, you have to hike up a steep ridge or take an old 4x4. The church sits all by itself on a high plateau. When I arrived, the whole valley was covered in a thick, white fog. You couldn't see anything. It felt like standing in a void. And then, the sun began to rise. Slowly, the mist began to move away. First, the shape of the 14th century church appeared. Then, the fog cleared completely to show the huge peak of Mount Kazbek right behind it. It's a mountain so perfectly shaped, so covered in white ice, that it doesn't even look real. As the first light hit the stone of the church, a monk came out of a small door. He walked to the bell tower and began to ring the bell. The sound echoed across the whole valley, bouncing off.